Biztech's APAC Cybersecurity Show. Today, we have Daniel Chu, the Vice President of Systems Engineering APJ at Extrahop. Extrahop is a cybersecurity company providing AI-based network intelligence that stops advanced threats across cloud, hybrid, and distributed environments. Now, to tell us more about Extrahop and the role they play in cybersecurity, welcome to the show, Daniel.
Hey, happy to be here, Brian.
Now, Daniel, for a start, give us an overview of Extrahop and your role within the company.
Yeah, sure. So Extrahop, like you quite well described, we're what we call a network detection and response platform. So we do analytics on your enterprise network in order to surface any sort of anomalous behaviors and to detect them and provide real-time incident response. So we're basically trying to catch the bad actors in the early stages of an attack, as well as the mid stages of attack, so they don't cause any more damage.
Now, tell us about AI hallucination. What's that all about, and what's the real threat around this?
Yeah, sure. So normally when we talk about AI hallucination, we're talking in the context of large language models, or LLMs. And as we all know, with these generated responses, we're seeing them to be sometimes grammatically correct, but when you take a little closer look at them, they sometimes might be incoherent or even plain factually incorrect. And some of the commentary is we kind of have settled with the term hallucination, which might be a little cute, I'm confused, benign term, but it can be deceptively misleading or it can be confidently wrong. And so that's the risk that's posed along with this hallucination.
Okay, now tell us about the weaponization of this for cyber attacks.
Yeah, sure. So maybe I can talk about the risks because first off, how did these hallucinations happen? First, there's the nature of how the data is being trained. We're relying on statistical patterns and probabilities, but also the data on top of this type of statistical patterns and probabilities can be outdated, they can be wrong, they can have gaps. And as a result, there's these hallucinations. Now, what we have found is that I think that everyone agrees that the cat is outside the bag, right? Most employees who have leveraged generative AI for some purposes have realized how much it can increase their productivity and make their life easier. Microsoft recently released a survey from a few months ago where, to no shock of anyone, 78% of the people in Asia Pacific realized that they wanted to throw as many tasks to AI to reduce their workloads. So that's kind of the context for this hallucination. There's a risk with misleading or flat out wrong data, and there's an urge to become more productive as employees to make our company money, but also be more productive at their jobs. Now, when it comes to weaponization of that AI hallucination, that's where things get interesting. There was a recent, the very well-known research advisory firm Forrester, they have made some predictions where they said next year, they see at least 3 published data breaches that are due to the vulnerabilities that the software code has generated by AI. So what does that mean? So we're generating a lot of these codes, and a lot of the developers these days are using what they call co-pilots for their generative AI, who's helped them aid in the development of code. But that data that's being used to respond and generate the code can be poisoned. And when it can be poisoned, what you have is, in the innocent case, code that's generated with vulnerable information, or in a more explicit form, people can poison the data to put backdoors. So what you have as a result is what? You have developers who are unsuspecting. They're trying to make their life easier. They write some code. Generative AI comes back with some code. They don't vet them, and they just release them to the production environment. And so what happens? You have code that's already has known vulnerabilities or has a purposeful backdoor. And at the end, you have hackers that are able to leverage this and disseminate it in a very fast and efficient fashion now. Instead of trying to break into each organization one by one, you seem to have a backdoor into a lot of people's organizations that happen to be leveraging your malicious code.
Daniel, that's frightening. That is absolutely frightening because essentially, I'm sure across the world, a lot of developers are using AI tools to basically accelerate the code generation, and therefore, essentially, without realizing, making their firms more and more vulnerable.
For sure.
So then how can companies a company's cybersecurity team protect themselves against this? How can businesses prepare?
Yeah, so the first thing I always tell my friends, being my customers or my colleagues, that these co-pilots are great for making your job more efficient, but you got to really think of them as like a hardworking junior intern. They can help you with a lot of the tedious tasks, but you at the end of the day are the ones that's vetting it, and you still need the expertise. They're not going to take away your job. You're just going to make your life easier, right? So I think having that mentality is very important when we discuss how powerful the tool of generative AI is and the risks involved with the AI hallucination. But I'll give you a really interesting statistic, Brian. So at Extrahop, we recently generated an AI report, and we surveyed a lot of IT and security leaders about their greatest concern of using these generative AI tools. And what ranked above everything from leaking trade secrets to personal identifiable information, the number one concern is hallucination. People were very concerned about having inaccurate or nonsensical responses. And these are coming from both IT and security leaders. So the first thing is the recognition portion, right? I think everyone recognizes that hallucinations is a problem, but they have to also recognize that they can't just ban them, right? It's a net positive to cybersecurity, and the policies have to be shaped accordingly. Based on our experience, most security operations centers in the cybersecurity world are just they're keeping their head right above water all the time. They're flooded with detections, they're understaffed, they're undermanned. So if there's any tools that can make their life easier by streamlining detections, automating incident response, writing the report for them after an incident response, that's all godsend and that's all helpful. And so that's the risk that comes along with it. But you have to adapt your strategy forward. It's a technology you need to embrace, and you have to be fully cognizant of the risks involved with these AI hallucinations.
Okay, now, now wearing your Extrahop hat, how can Extrahop help organizations?
Yeah, sure. So we're an analytics engine at heart. So we are analyzing a lot of network quality data across the enterprise. Everything from which users are accessing a file to a database, what websites they're going to, what servers they're authenticating. And so there's a wealth of data that we can leverage for the tasks of training, ultimately, generative AI. So one of the challenges with a lot of these models is having good quality, unfiltered, unsiloed data. And so that's one thing that we can potentially help with. The other one is, given that we're collecting all this information, is being able to help leverage that information to, like I mentioned, get better detections in terms of high quality detections, so they're not flooded with false positives, as well as the ability to really help prioritize where an analyst should be looking. And those are things that generative AI can help out with. Instead of shifting through numerous alerts or countless log files to understand what's going on, to help prioritize, help detect, and help automate it are some of the things that Extrahop helps with.
Prioritize, detect, and then automate. I think that's a really key thing, especially the prioritization bit, because as you alluded to earlier in our conversation, departments are just overwhelmed. And I think prioritizing is one of those key things to really just focus the attention on the 80% that's going to make the difference.
For sure, for sure. Like I mentioned, there's understaffed, there's a lack of expertise as a whole across Asia Pacific worldwide. So anything that can give them slight edge and make their lives efficient, those are all godsend. Yeah. And as long as they're cognizant of the risks involved, it will be a net positive at the end of the day.
Now, Daniel, then looking ahead, with the end of 2023 now, what's the outlook and the future for generative AI within the cybersecurity space for 2024? What are some of the key trends that you'll see?
Yeah, cybersecurity is always going to be the cat and mouse game, right? So let me talk about the cat and then the mouse, or maybe the other way around. So let's talk the defender side. Like I mentioned, generative AI is going to be helping with streamlining detection investigations, help recommending it, help prioritizing. And that's our things that we're doing at Extrahop today. And we're going to follow and continue to innovate in those aspects. We're going to help automate a lot of these threat workflows, threat hunting workflows. Right now, there's very manual process. We're going to try to automate them so that they're more streamlined. And after you do all these investigations, nowadays, a lot of people have to generate these long reports. They have to type out the reports and send them to management. A lot of those tasks can be automated as well. And so I do see a case for next year where these are just beginning baby steps in the process of automation and making things more efficient and prioritizing it. And we'll continue to see that get more and more ingrained in the security operations. What I find more exciting is not just making things more efficient, but also helping with knowledge bases. There's a wealth of information that's out there. Some of them are qualities, some not so. But a lot of this information can help train the next generation or the more junior people that are coming in. That's hopefully the promise of generative AI is to help train, to help for any sort of workflows, everything from recovering a system that got compromised to the workflows to help to do investigations. And I'm very excited about that. So that's on the defender side. My predictions on the attacker sides are, hey, we just lowered the barrier of entry for a lot of these hackers, right? In the past, we could look at an email and say, this is a non-native English speaker. Clearly, this is a spam. Now they can write pretty convincing emails. And so those are things that we have to have our guard up. So the barrier of entry is lower for monetizations, and they can be very convincing. And it's not just emails, right? We can see deep fakes with voice, with video. And so it's going to be a more challenging times as we have to get our guards up and just be very paranoid. I think it'll be very helpful to be paranoid on any sort of content you see, whether it's a video, an audio, or an email, to just have your guards up. And so those are kind of my predictions where I would definitely sense that these things are going to get more and more realistic as we proceed.
Daniel, this has been a really interesting chat. I've learned a lot. I'm also a little bit more alarmed as well. But before we leave, any final thoughts you'd like to leave the audience with in terms of key takeaways?
Yeah, generative AI is here to stay. The cat's out the bag. There's a lot of productivity enhancements that can be involved, that we can extract from it, but it is in its infancy. It's very dynamic. So what I suggest all business owners and decision makers have an item and a reoccurring agenda item to discuss that. This is an evolving space. Things are changing rapidly. We can discuss the risks involved as well as the benefits to making your organization more valuable. And so I highly encourage that this is not something you just sweep under the cover or just do a blanket ban. Really understand it, understand where it's coming from, and understand how it can make your life and your organization more valuable.
Daniel, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you very much for your insights.
Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Brian.
Now, we've been speaking to Daniel Chu. He's the Vice President of Systems Engineering, APJ, at Extrahop. I'm Brian Fernandez, and you've been watching and listening to Biztech's APAC Cybersecurity Show. Catch the conversation and much more on www.biztech.asia, as well as our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.